Well, top of the afternoon to everybody here on this March 17th. Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee. Welcome everyone. We'll take a roll call right off the bat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilor Carlson.
Present.
Councilor Schmidt-Rempel.
Here.
Councilor Palladino.
Present.
And Councilor Campbell.
I'm here.
Excellent. We have Mayor Hagan on the line. Councilor Middleton Hope has also joined us. There's several members of administration online and in the room.
We'll proceed with the adoption. The acknowledgement statement. City of Lethbridge acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people, past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationships to the land. The City of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta. Next up, the adoption of the agenda from Councilor Palladino. Be it resolved that the agenda of the regular meeting of the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee on Thursday, March 17th, 2022 be adopted as presented. Mr. Palladino. Questions? There's no changes? Nope. Okay, all good? All in favor? Okay. Consent agenda from Councilor Schmidt-Rempel. Be it resolved that the minutes of the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee held on Thursday, February the 17th, 2022 be approved, and the chair and the city clerk designate be authorized to sign the same. Councilor Schmidt-Rempel.
If none of my colleagues have any questions or concerns with those minutes, I will call the question.
Question's been called. In favor? Okay. Passed. Moving on to presentations, 5.1, a salute to our Veterans Project, and we have Wayne King and Danielle Goslin. Come on up. Welcome, thank you for being here, appreciate it.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank the committee very much for the opportunity to address you and through you potentially to City Council for the description of the program that we would like to present. Danielle Goslin and I are both veterans, members of the Legion, of course, and in addition to members of the committee, the Salute Our Veterans Committee, we are also members of the Legion Poppy Committee as well. So we're very directly and intimately involved with support for our veterans in the community. First of all, I'd like to just indicate the aim and objective of this particular briefing. It's to provide background for your committee on the proposal that we want to put before you, the Salute the Veterans Banner program for Lethbridge. We seek the support of this committee and potentially through the committee the support of City Council and the citizens of Lethbridge in the furtherance of this particular project. Next. And one more, if you would, please. Just to indicate a little bit of background on the Salute Our Veterans Banner program. For several years, communities across Canada have commenced veteran banner programs to pay tribute to Canadians and allied veterans. This also includes current service personnel that are in our community. Excuse me. In southern Alberta, a number of communities, such as Banff, Fort Macleod, and Taber, initiated the program in the very recent past. Prior to that, other communities, such as High River, Okotoks, Invermere, and many others, I must admit, across Canada, have had a program, if not identical to the one that we are proposing, but one very similar. They have been very active in the presentation of this program for a number of years. We view this program as being an addition or adjunct to the program that is adopted across Canada, the Poppy campaign and the recognition of the contributions of the veterans to our freedoms, our society, and the way of life that we all of us enjoy here in Canada. It's certainly a program which I believe is one which will gain good recognition and favorable support from the citizens. Next, please. Why is the program important to us? I think all of us are extremely well aware of the upset and the controversy, the basically state of war that exists now in Ukraine. The Ukraine is one area of the world which has in past conflicts, international conflict, been given rise to a great deal of armed intervention, either from an allied perspective or from the other side of the fence. In our society, in this world, we are not free from armed conflict. And I think in some respects we are bound to continue and suffer the ravages of armed conflict unless we recognize what it is and do whatever we can to avoid that type of conflict. Recognizing the contribution of our veterans, both present and past, is one of the things that we can very actively undertake. We want to engage the community in honoring local veterans, again, present and past, in a very colorful and vibrant way. It will help promote the remembrance in our community of the veterans and the contributions they have made to our way of life. And importantly, it will also help to educate the students, the youth in our community, on the faces and stories of service of our veterans. I think for many of us, or many of the youth in our community, if you speak to them about the conflict of the First World War, the Korean War, or even some of the earlier UN engagements that Canada has been involved in, they have to refer to history books. It's enough in the past for them that they really have no personal or immediate memory of the type of involvement of our country in these conflicts. This program, this banner program, is one way of bringing that realization to the minds of our youth and keeping them engaged in honoring the contributions and the sacrifice of our veterans. It allows members of our community to connect with everyday people and current veterans who have made the extraordinary decision to serve their country. And it will help to ensure continued recognition and remembrance in our future generations. These are important objectives, important engagements that I believe we must keep in mind. Next, please. Specifically, the Lethbridge program is in two principal parts. First of all, the veterans' banners, an example of which you see on the screen, shows a picture of a particular veteran, and it would be present on light standards around the city as approved by city administration. Secondly, we would engage in the preparation of a website, and that website would display the names of all of the veterans whose banners have been supported by organizations or family members. And by selecting a particular name on that website, a further and more elaborate explanation of that individual's service and contribution to our society will be displayed. So it's a two-part program, but in combination, it keeps the presence of the veteran before the youth and the citizens of our city. The banners we envisaged would be displayed every year, typically in the period from 1 October through Remembrance Day. Thereafter, they would be taken down as soon as could reasonably be arranged, kept in storage, and redisplayed again in the following year. They would be displayed in that manner as many years as the banners themselves are in good condition, or until renewed either through replication or some other means. But it is as I say, not an elaboration, but an adjunct to the Remembrance Day program on the surrounding the 11th of November. And the next one, please. We anticipate that in year one, we would display banners in 5 principal areas, principally within the center core area of the city. First of all, immediately in front of City Hall and the cenotaph. The 4th Avenue typically is renumbered or renamed as a Veterans Way or some such appellation, but present on the light standards by the cenotaph and the City Hall, we would have a number of banners displayed, indicating our initial look at it would suggest that we would have 26 banners in this area. Other areas that we would select for initial involvement would be those areas that were principally involved in the formation and transportation of the various units, military units within Lethbridge for service overseas. Areas such as on First Avenue or the train station. In years past, of course, the train was the major means of transport for people and goods. So there's a number of locations in that area. We see possibility for 30 banners there. In the Lethbridge Legion, an area which certainly is centered the interests of the veteran in our community. We see places for about 13 banners. The Lethbridge Army, Navy, and Air Force Club area, there are 4 suitable light poles in that particular location. And in recent years, of course, the airport has been one of importance as far as dispatch of personnel to areas of conflict around the world. So a further 18 would be perhaps placed in that area. A total on year one of 91 banners. These have been discussed with some of the specific city managers and so on, whether they would be, the light standards would be suitable for a presentation of the banner, and I believe in all cases the indication we have is that yes, they would be. And the next, please. In year 2 and 3, we would see further expansion of the program to include areas such as Galt Gardens, the Exhibition Park, Scenic Drive, which has the Eternal Flame as well as the Field of Honor contained within it, University Drive on the west side, 13th Street North, and Fort Whoop-Up. In combination with the sites that we've selected for year one, that would present a pretty much a citywide exposure of these banners for the citizens. Next, please. The proposed banners, an example of which is on the screen now, is a banner which is 26 inches wide, 60 inches deep. And it displays from the top the flag of Canada, the ensign. The reason we've shown both, in recent years, of course, all military personnel have served under the flag of Canada. Prior to that, the majority, unless you go back quite a ways in our history, served under the ensign. And that includes World War II, as well as Korea. In this particular case, we've depicted a portrait of General Stewart, who was very intimately involved in the development of Canadian artillery here in Lethbridge. And of course, he is a World War I veteran, as well as a native of Lethbridge. On the bottom, we have depicted 3 logos. First of all, the City of Lethbridge logo, the Legion logo, and also the 702 wing of the Royal Canadian Air Force Association. And we view those 3 as being partners in the development and display of this program. Next, please. The program budget, first of all, the banners themselves, the template and website. The initial development of the website would cost about $4,500, and additions to the website, names and so on, each year would result in a further expenditure of about $2,000 each. We view that this would be provided by donations and grants. We have asked through the Poppy Fund that the initial $4,500 be funded by the Poppy program. Secondly, the banners themselves, depending on public support and so on, would cost in the order of $16,000 a year in each of year 1, 2, and 3, and that would be supported by donations or contributions from individual citizens, companies, organizations, and community members. In some cases, perhaps some from current veterans themselves. The banner hardware, as you'll note there, depicted in red, of course, this is one of our objectives in approaching the city. We are asking that the city undertake the purchase of the banner hardware itself. Year 1, $20,500, and year 2 and 3 each of $22,000, for a total expenditure of approximately $64,500. Admittedly, there is some unknown factors there as to other things like transportation costs, tax rates, and so on. But those we feel are fairly close estimates of what it would result in as far as city expenditure. Next, the contract to put up and take down the banners annually. That would be $10,000 initially, and then $20,000 and $30,000 each in year 2 and 3, supported by donations from, principally from various companies and organizations in the city of Lethbridge. A minor expenditure, City of Lethbridge banner application fee, which is consistent with the policy established by the city. And finally, a $2 million insurance coverage. That coverage actually already exists under an insurance program by the Legion, and specifically for the banner program, we would undertake to add the City of Lethbridge as a named insured. So over a 3-year period then, the total expenditure would be in the order of $181,600. Next, please. Specifically, the request of the city then would be to act as a co-sponsor or partner in presentation of the Salute Our Veterans program to the city of Lethbridge. Secondly, to provide banner hardware. The hardware, if purchased by the city, would become property of the city. Once mounted on the light standards selected for this program, it would remain in place and be available for the city to utilize in any further banner programs that the city might approve during other periods of the year. And thirdly, endorse the placement of the 26 by 60 veteran banners on specific city light poles. These have been staffed by various departments within the city, and we believe that they have approved placement of these banners in the size that we have requested, much in the same fashion as the BRZ banners are presently located on some of these poles. And I might add that some of those poles would serve double duty during that period when the Salute Our Veterans banners are in place. Some of those BRZ banners would come down, be replaced by the veteran banners, and then, of course, on the 11th of November, or very soon thereafter, removed, and the BRZ banners would be reposted on those light standards. Next, please. We have already obtained wide support throughout the city of Lethbridge from not only individuals but also various organizations, a number of which you see listed on this particular slide, and we are receiving more indications of support almost weekly. So it represents a good broad spectrum of the citizens of Lethbridge that are indicating support for the program, one which I believe the city would certainly be in favor of as far as maintaining the kind of individual support that we like to see for various programs. Next, please. In conclusion, then, we believe that the city of Lethbridge, its citizens, have a very lengthy and proud association with the military that extends to this day. The history of our city is one which certainly has been indicative of the fulsome support by the citizens of this city for the continuation of the national military programs that has been adopted from time to time. An indication of the support of the city, I think, is also exemplified by the adoption of 429 Squadron by the city of Lethbridge during World War II, and that adoption remains in place to the present day. With the passing of the Boer War, First World War, and now many of our Second World War veterans and Korea veterans, we have need to ensure that the remembrance of the sacrifices of the veterans of our community be maintained in presence of mind among the citizens of this city. Their sacrifice has been very instrumental in being able to enjoy the kinds of freedoms that we do today. But we can only maintain that by programs such as this and keep the memory and the knowledge alive. This project will greatly enhance our ability to accomplish that objective. The city is requested to provide up to $20,500 in 2022 and up to $64,500 over a 3-year period for banner hardware. That $64,500 is inclusive of the $20,500 this fiscal year. The hardware would remain, of course, the property of the city and could then be used by other city-supported banner requests. And once installed, that hardware, once installed on the light standards, it would remain in place. The support of this committee is requested to allow this submission to go before council. And one further thing that we are asking for is the right to display the city logo on the banners as a partner in the presentation of this program. And now I'll open it up for any questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Appreciate it. I will open it up. Do we have Councilor Carlson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nice to see you up and about in council chambers again, Mark. And also congratulations on your Scottishman's attempt at an Irish accent earlier.
Not a problem.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for the presentation and all the information provided. Couple quick questions. The budget that's proposed, a lot of it relies on fundraising and donations. What happens if those don't materialize?
The indication that we have at the present time, although we haven't received those funds yet because, of course, we don't have a finalization of a program that we can go forward with, but the indication that we have thus far is that the support, the financial support for the program will be forthcoming. We do have some indication that we can anticipate some good support from business within our community. We have, I'm not sure, our chairman of the committee, Ray Romsas, unfortunately was not able to attend with us today, but I know he has received a number of requests from individual family groups or individual citizens. When can I donate or present the funds necessary for a banner and so on? So the interest is there. I believe the support is there. And at this stage, I have no hesitation in saying, yes, I believe once the city joins as a partner in this program and approves the funding, that it will be a go. I would certainly agree that should the city not participate in providing the banner hangers, that would increase the cost of individual banners to a point perhaps that we would anticipate reduced public support or public involvement. So the city involvement, not only from the perspective that we're asking for use of city-owned property, the light standards, but provision of the hangars is an essential element of this program.
Thank you for that. I can, Mr. Chair, a question to Ms. Bracken, who provided an administrative response, if I can. I'm not sure if Ms. Bracken
Ms. Bracken is here. She's coming forward.
Excellent. Thank you. Ms. Bracken, I believe the presentation mentioned that I'd made some notes earlier that we do own some hardware. I know that when we hosted the Tour of Alberta cycling, we had banners up around the community. I know that the Allied Arts, I believe, has put up some banners, and downtown BRZ as mentioned. How many of those are currently available?
Councillor Carlson, I'd actually have to defer that question to Richard Brumman, who's here, Manager of Transportation. I don't actually know that answer. That department manages the banner program that we currently have in place.
Okay, thanks. If Mr. Brumman is there.
He's stepping forward.
Excellent.
Slowly.
Big walk, and I have the same answer, unfortunately.
Oh.
Usually what happens is there's groups that come to us, and they actually pay for the hardware and the banners and everything, and we just usually put them up. So I can check into that, but right now, currently, I don't know.
Thank you. That'd be something worth knowing, because I know that when Tour of Alberta was here, we had a multitude of banners around the community. I think I still have one hanging in my office somewhere.
And we have a number of ones that we could give out as well in our singles
Yes,
shop.
I know. I grabbed one to give to the Galt Museum, and they said, no, we've got some, thank you. But yeah, if we could find out what our inventory is, because that would help defray the costs, unless these are of a different size or style.
Nope, same.
Same.
It's the ones we use.
Okay. Just a final question on that tack, then, Mr. Chair. How readily or quickly can we find out if we have an inventory or what's available?
Mr. Fox wants to answer that. Oh.
Through the chair, I think Mr. Brennan is looking into it, but hopefully by the end of this meeting we would know. But it depends how fast his text works.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have one final question, then I'll hop out if I can. Gentlemen, I appreciate the locations you've highlighted in your presentation for their significance. Were there any on Mayor McGrath Drive?
That certainly is an area that we envisage in year 2 and 3. It's certainly an area which is amply trafficked by citizens of Lethbridge, and yes, it would certainly be included in year 2 and 3.
Thank you. Then, Mr. Chair, as a follow-up to that, do we have anyone from finance with us? Or the city manager? I'll ask it through the city manager or designate.
Oh,
In
Mr.
our
Van
budget-
Hoovel's here.
Oh, okay, thank you. In our budget, in our reserve portfolio, we have a reserve called the Mayor McGrath Drive Beautification Fund, I believe. I'm wondering if something like this would be an appropriate use of those dollars. I just can't remember what exactly the stipulations on that fund are.
Thank you, Councilor Carlson. Can you hear me all right?
I can. Thank you, Tony.
So with regards to the funding for this project for the city portion, what was recommended from City Treasurer Daryl Matthews was that because it's one-time dollars, we look firstly at the BAUs from council contingencies to cover the 2022 and portion of the 2023 allocation, and then follow it in the following year out of council contingency. The city contribution is capped approximately at that 60,000 mark, and I will review with Daryl prior to this item coming forward to council for decision the availability of what's in the beautification fund for Mayor McGrath as an alternate source. But his first source of funding was council contingency BAU and they capped the amount of the 60,000 requested.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I may have some further questions, but I'll hop out.
Could I address one of the
sure.
comments that was made with respect to existing stock? I know when our chairman of Ray Ronzis went around and looked at actual poles that we were looking at putting banners on, that those that already had brackets on them were taken into account in his figures. And if you look at year 1, the astute of you would have noticed that the cost for 82 sets is $20,500, which is less than the 80 for $22,000, and that's to take into account reusing the existing brackets that are mounted. But in the other follow-on years, there wasn't any in those sites.
Thank you for that. Any other questions from councillors? It's just to confirm, though, if we were to go ahead in year 1, whoever wants to take this, we do have some contingency money available to get this project going, correct? Whoever wants to take that, Mr. Fox?
Sure, through the chair, it is my understanding that we do have the available funds.
But thank you. No other questions? Then I will go to, thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. To me, when you're talking about veterans and making sure we remember them, it's just, for me, it's a no-brainer. We have to keep that alive. And the more we go forward, the more we think about people who have been in Afghanistan or whatever conflict has been, not just World War II or I or the Korean conflict. So I really believe that this is a project that can go on in perpetuity. So if there's no other question, any other comments from anyone? I see none. So I do have a resolution from Councilor Schmidt-Rempel. Be it resolved that the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee recommends City Council provide funding for this project in the amount of $24,000 from council contingencies in 2022. And further be it resolved that the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee recommends City Council directs administration to develop an operating budget initiative for the 2023 to 2026 operating budget deliberations for the Salute Our Veterans project. Councillor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much. And thank you both very much for your presentation and for your service. Yes, this project it's a great form of intergenerational conversation, and it's our responsibility as council to certainly be initiating that. Remembering our veterans in this very visible way offers a reference point for understanding and engaging in conversation about the impacts of war. And just on some research that I did this weekend after taking a look at this project, it saddens me to see that younger generations are less likely to recall our veterans and remember them. And this is a good way to do that and initiate that conversation. If there are no other comments from other members of council, I would call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor?
No,
Oh,
I have questions.
Sorry, pardon me.
Sorry,
Sorry.
sorry,
Chair.
Jeff.
Go ahead.
That's all right. First question is, the ask is 20,500, not 24,000?
That
For
was,
2020.
I think that was given to by administration, was it, Mr. Fox, to 24,000? Or that was the recommended amount?
I'm just wondering why we're contributing more than is being asked.
It's a good question. Sorry. Thanks.
Through the chair, I'll just have to look at the report here and see what the number was. I believe 20,000? It is 20,500.
Okay. Sorry. Just it was a bit of a typo. 20,500.
Thanks
Sorry.
for catching
Thank
that, Jeff.
No problem.
Okay.
Second question. I wonder if we can not specify where the funding is going to come from right now. We do have some other pressures on council contingencies, and while I'm not convinced we can utilize the funds right now, the Mayor McGrath Drive Beautification Fund, if we were to purchase all of the hardware for year one, out of that, it could always be utilized on Mayor McGrath in other off times. I'm just trying to find a possible other source. So I just don't know if do we need to be specific at this moment for where the funding comes from before we sort of check into two things. How much hardware we actually still have or could defray that initial investment by, and B, where the funding source could come from.
We should identify. Yep. Okay. Okay. We'd like to, well, from what I understand, we'd like to identify a source, but perhaps we can ask administration come back to identify the, sorry, because there's no immediacy on this right now, correct?
I believe it has to go in front of council in 3 weeks.
Okay. We'll be able to identify it by then?
Through the chair, yes. I believe that we could do a comprehensive review of different funding pots and bring them back to council at that time to decide.
Uh,
Okay. Does that satisfy you, Mr. Carlson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It would. So I'm not sure what the resolution should read, but that we recommend council approve with funding to be determined.
You're going to want to refer it to administration to identify.
Okay. What we'll do is we'll refer it to administration to identify a funding source for part one.
And to report back at the April 5th council meeting.
Okay. And report back in the April 5th council meeting.
Thank you. And my secondary hope, because I too am Scottish, is that we can find enough hardware to defray that cost. I'm wondering if we should say project in the amount of up to for the first year.
Does that work for everyone?
Through the chair,
Yep.
if I may, I was just updated that the current hardware that we have in the stores is too small for some of the poles to update. So we do not have any spare hardware at the city.
Okay.
Curses. Thank you, Mr. Fox, for popping my balloon. But thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So
believe-
let's just
I believe-
make sure we've got the resolution clear. And Mr. Westerson is working on that right now as we speak, so that we just have it clear before us. I would say there's no question we're going to find the funding, but it's just a matter of where. He's typing very diligently. Okay. And it's coming.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Yep, go ahead.
It's Blaine here.
And you are?
I'm just wondering here, thank you, Mr. Chair. if the brackets, from what I heard earlier, if the brackets are not going to be used, is that dollar figure then from the first year where we thought we'd be able to use some older brackets, is that going to cause a concern, and should it be similar to that of the following years if we've just found out that the brackets can't be used? Because I think we took that into account, or this committee did at that point, correct?
Mr. Fox?
Through the chair, I believe that was just for brackets that are in storage. Current brackets that are on poles would be able to be used.
Thank you very much.
We're still just waiting the clarification on the resolution. We'll get to that momentarily. Good question. Can I read it? Yeah, we'll put it right behind you there. Okay. All right. So here it is. Be it resolved, the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee refer this item to administration to determine a funding source and report back to the April 5th, 2022 council meeting. And further be it resolved that the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee recommends City Council directs administration to develop an operating budget initiative for the 2023-2026 operating budget deliberations for the Salute of Our Veterans project. Refer back to Ms. Schmidt-Rempel.
Does anyone have any questions about this? Seeing no questions, I will call the question.
All right. This time, anything else? Nope. Mr. Carlson, your name is there. Are you in for another question?
No, Mr. Chair, I took my hand down. I'm not sure how to.
No problem. All right. So, question's been called. All in favor? All right. That passes. Thank you very much. 5.2 from Robin James, CAO, Lethbridge Housing Authority. If you can come forward, Ms. James.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to allow us to present to you today. My name is Robin James. I'm the CAO for the Lethbridge Housing Authority. With me here today is Kayla.
I'm Kayla Podrasky, the Director of Community Alliances at Lethbridge Housing Authority.
What we'd like to present to you today is a little bit of information of who we are, who our community partners are, and what we do in the community and what we can do differently to help the city achieve some of their goals. So the Lethbridge Housing Authority is a housing management body established under a ministerial order back in the 90s to deliver housing, affordable housing on behalf of the province of Alberta to those most vulnerable in our city. We currently have 795 units scattered across the city of Lethbridge and another 64 units currently being built as a mixed model seniors property and behind Lowe's. Lethbridge Housing Authority is guided by ministerial objectives set out by the Minister of Seniors and Housing and by our current business plan and our board of directors. We also operate a rent supplement budget in excess of about $3 million, which assists about 600 additional households in the city of Lethbridge and surrounding areas. So we serve about 2,500 Albertans through our Lethbridge Housing office. Lethbridge Housing also has a not-for-profit, a solely owned not-for-profit charity organization called Lethbridge and Region Community Housing Corporation. It's a not-for-profit charity that does housing activities such as housing supports and also does the affordable piece of the housing within our city of Lethbridge. So affordable means affordable, the rent is affordable to the market, whereas the Lethbridge Housing Authority is the rent is affordable to the client. So the client's income is taken into consideration in Lethbridge Housing, whereas the rental affordability is taken into consideration in Lethbridge Region Community Housing Corporation. In Lethbridge, we partner with a great number of individuals and organizations in order to achieve success for our clients. One of our largest partners, of course, across the city of Lethbridge is our landlords. We partner with private landlords in order to deliver our services. We used to have a program that's actually currently being phased out, which was called the Private Landlord Supplement Program, where we could reach out to private landlords and actually have an agreement with them on 100 units or 20 units or whatever many units that we could bring our clients through into their units and actually pay the differential of rent for them. That program has since been phased out, and it's moved to a direct-to-tenant funded program, but we are still able to have some really great landlord relationships. We also have a relationship with Alberta Health Services. We partner with Public Health on our hoarding program through the Lethbridge Housing Authority. We do all the hoarding and squalor for the City of Lethbridge. We partner with the Chinook Hospital's, Lethbridge Hospital's social work team, so when they have someone coming out of maybe out of a surgical ward or out of a mental health hold or something like that, where they're not released into homelessness, they'll actually work through us to see if there's somewhere they can put them so we're not releasing people out of the hospital and into homelessness. We have community support programs. We work with the Fresh Start Treatment Center to provide rent supplements to their graduates so that they can maintain sobriety while they're able to live independently and look for housing. We partner with addictions and mental health, persons with developmental disabilities, and then our service providers are Canadian Mental Health, McMahon, Streets Alive, LSCO, Norbridge Senior Centre, the YWCA, and Lethbridge Family Services, to name a few. So what we wanted to present after telling you all this information is what we can do differently to help impact the homeless component within the City of Lethbridge. As you know, housing and homelessness are separate, funded through separate ministries and funded through separate levels of government and funded very separately here in Lethbridge. So housing in Lethbridge is funded direct funding to Lethbridge Housing Authority through that ministerial order, whereas homelessness in the City of Lethbridge is funded through the City of Lethbridge, through your Community Social Development Department and the team there, and then those funding decisions are made, and I believe you're actually looking at some of those today. We wanted to let you know that there's a few things that we could do to help you. During the pandemic, we noticed for sure that Lethbridge Housing Authority was one of the only organizations that was open. You couldn't come into the city. You couldn't come into many of the other places. Even the provincial building was closed. We were mandated to continue to house people, and my time is up, and sorry, I'm just going to talk for one more. So we were mandated to continue to do our best. So we noticed through those 2 years, while keeping our doors open and other doors were closed, that we have a huge advantage to be able to serve our most vulnerable people in our community because we're able to keep our doors open. You can actually come to the Lethbridge Housing Authority office and you can say I'm homeless, or you can say I can't pay my utility bills, or I'm living in my vehicle, and some sort of action and some sort of person will help you. Whether we can help you today or whether we can help you next week, we will see you and we will help you. We also provide a prevention program that is funded through Community Social Services. We are, I believe, the only eviction prevention program in the City of Lethbridge. We also administered on behalf of City Council your COVID funds for those of you who were on City Council last term. So last year we supported 140 individuals and families and keeping 95% of those individuals stably housed in their home. The other thing that we can do, because we're the housing management body, we own our own properties and we can leverage our existing properties to build and purchase a great number of units. This allows us to expand our continuum of housing in Lethbridge. This is something that we've been talking about. I've been in this industry for, this will be 16 years, and we've been talking about care campuses, and we've been talking about permanent supportive housing, transitional housing for as long as I can remember. But through our organization, we are able to borrow, we are able to leverage, and we do have the expertise to manage properties like that. Lethbridge Housing Authority is an organization that has been focused on providing safe, affordable housing in our community since 1974. Over the years, we have expanded to provide our housing support, such as our eviction prevention, our hoarding, our seniors navigations, and our on-support client staff for all of our LHA rent supplement clients and tenants. We have a strong relationship with various ministries through the provincial government, and we'd like to focus our efforts if we can move in the way of homelessness into more meaningful daily activities and social enterprises through partnerships. So everything else I've laid out in there, and I'm kind of out of time, but we wanted to let you know what we do, let you know who we are, and let you know that we're very eager and very interested in being a big part of your homeless continuum.
Thank you, Ms. James. Appreciate it. Can I just ask, what for you and your association is the biggest stumbling block that the homeless face on a regular basis? What do you see, and what is the answer to this stumbling block that each of them face?
So, I mean, you could go back as far as trauma, addictions, mental health, like that piece that brings them into the homeless system to begin with. But what we see a lot on our end is we have the housing, we have the ability to actually physically, bricks and mortar, put someone in a house. But when housing and housing supports can't walk hand in hand, and they can't work under the same ideas and the same principles, then it makes it extremely difficult to keep people housed. So then we will see eviction from there. So I think one of the big things that we need to see in Lethbridge is housing and homelessness literally walking hand in hand, so that when we are transitioning people out of homelessness and into housing, that they can remain successfully housed.
Any other questions from councillors? Councillor Middleton Hope.
Just one, Ms. James. In regards to employment for continued housing, how do you link with employment opportunities or employment services?
Currently linked or in the future?
Well,
So
currently linked, apparently not, but in the
Currently
future?
linked, no.
Okay.
So what we would like to see is more social enterprise. What we see in our homeless population is a lot of people with lacking a lot of capacity. And so their best day won't necessarily be working at a McDonald's or a Tim Hortons, and may not even be working at a bottle depot. But if we started to provide some sort of a social enterprise, expand on the Clean Sweep program, for example, move more into helping the City of Lethbridge or working with the City of Lethbridge to clean local parks. Also, a recommendation of mine, if I could rule the world and do everything, which I know I can't, Lethbridge Housing has nearly 800 units. I have 800 units of grass that needs to be mowed, sidewalks that need to be shoveled, fences that need to be painted. So within our own agency, we have a great number and a great deal of ability to be able to provide social enterprise to our community.
Is it a matter of funding then?
It's a matter of streaming the funding together.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Ms. James, thank you very much for your presentation. Just a couple questions out of what you've discussed. You indicate LHA, or the Lethbridge Regional Community Housing Corporation, not as a not-for-profit charity, and that you can leverage some of your assets as well as doing some fundraising. Tell me what that currently looks like for you.
So we just got our charity status this 2021, so we're just looking at how we can start kind of fundraising and that sort of thing for some initiatives we want to do. But the 64 units that are currently being built in behind Lowe's are a great example of us being able to leverage assets and being able to borrow on all three levels of government. So CMHC approved $4.8 million in a grant for that project. The provincial government gave us $3.45 million for that project. The City of Lethbridge gave us $655,000 for that project in the land before time. So we haven't, it just had been sitting there for 10 years waiting for us to use it. Plus you paid for some services for us. So it was about $800,000, I think, in total. And then we were able to obtain borrowing from a local agency to be able to, a local bank to be able to do the rest.
Thank you for that. To follow up on another comment that you made, particularly during the pandemic, where you were able to serve people that others weren't. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? What services did you hear people weren't able to get into that they had to come to you for? services that should have been provided by another agency that weren't.
Yeah, so because we're not a big part or a big player in the homelessness at this point, other agencies do pick up those homelessness pieces. So when other agencies needed to close due to, you know, their funding contracts, maybe with AHS or other organizations, there wasn't an open door. And we're trying to, so there wasn't a place to do a triage or a centralized intake. There wasn't a place to call. If you don't have a cell phone, how do you get a hold of income support? How do you get a hold of AISH? You know, you're supposed to call, you're supposed to leave a message, and they're supposed to get back to you within 5 to 7 business days. So keep your cell phone on with your data plan, with your paid subscription to Rogers, and we'll call you back in 5 to 7 days. It simply didn't work for our vulnerable population. So we were able to provide those services through the staff that we had in our staffing model in order to make sure that individuals were being able to be connected to services.
So just to follow up on that then, if you did have the funding from another funding source that supports homelessness and housing, you would be able to support those services in a seamless type manner as you did during the COVID outbreak.
Yeah, that's what we'd like to see ultimately from council, is a decision made in the future to put housing and homelessness together in a very similar and seamless way, nearly like what Medicine Hat does. Medicine Hat actually has their housing management body delivering their homeless service. And then, of course, it still goes out to funded agencies. We've got lots of great agencies in Lethbridge that can do lots of great work, but it just allows for a common goal, a common vision for everyone who, your council package today about your, what was that, your care campus. And it talked about the importance of making sure that, you know, there's a way to provide it with 10 different providers, and then there's a way to provide it with one provider, and the seamlessness of one provider because it's one goal and it's one mandate versus 10 people with 10 different goals and 10 different mandates. So it's the same idea. You know, really, if we have all different all over the place, it's hard for my staff to be able to house someone, take someone out of homelessness, house them, and then my staff, who are essentially landlords, are getting called all hours of the night. My maintenance guys are going out 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning to try to deal with tenant support situations, and we're not the tenant support provider. So what we're asking for is that seamless piece.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. James? I see no other questions. What I'd like to do is go through this resolution and then a follow-up resolution from Councilor Schmidt and Rempel, if I may. This first resolution, be it resolved that the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee receive this presentation as information. Councilor Palladino. Call. Okay. Question's been called. All in favor? That carries. Now, from Councillor Schmidt-Rempel, be it resolved that the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee refer this matter to administration to engage a third party to, number 1, review the allocation of outreach and support service initiatives, OSSI funding, in Lethbridge and other Alberta municipalities, and 2, to identify a best-in-class model for the delivery of these funds in our community and report back to the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee no later than September 30th, 2022. I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Rempel, Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much, Councillor Campbell. So just in follow-up to what we've heard from Ms. James, and it kind of ties into a little bit of the next presentation about the community care campus we're also going to be hearing about. I do think that what we need to do, and our CWSS group has done an amazing job of making recommendations and certainly are getting their feet under them. But before we fully commit to having them operate all that funding, I'd like to pull out this OSSI funding, which is funding to provide assistance to homeless individuals to obtain housing and provide housing support services and referrals to maintain long long-term housing stability. I'd like to pull that out and just have us really take a good look to identify a best-in-class model for delivery of these funds in our community. Particularly, we saw some gaps during the COVID pandemic. I think it's incumbent upon us, before we turn everything over to the CWSS group, to make sure that that is the group we want running that, particularly when there might be other groups in our city that could do that job. I took, just a few more looks at it. A couple of things we can't do in our current position is borrow and fundraise in an outside organization, as Ms. James just said with her organization. And I'm not saying that hers is the one we go with, but we could look at an outside organization that can do fundraising, that can expand services to our community without raising taxes, and they can provide and leverage assets to build capacity throughout our community. It does spread the decision-making out to another community organization, and I would trust that any other organization we had to operate this would work with our CWSS group to make sure that they're walking hand in hand together to move this along. So that's where I was coming from on this. If any other members of council had any questions, I'd certainly entertain any questions and explain my rationale on this.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor Schmidt-Rempel, for bringing this forward, and thank you for giving us a bit of a heads up. I think I've talked with you of some of my questions or thoughts on this, but I just have some clarification. Did in your preamble, did you say you were removing the first bullet? I thought you said something about...
No, it was more that I wanted to take this OSSI funding out of what the CWSS pot would be, and specifically look at that funding.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Mr. Chair, then through you, if I can, to administration, who's ever there, probably Mr. Fox, I'm assuming. A third party is being asked for here. Do we have any idea of what the cost of that sort of process would be?
Mr. Fox.
Through the chair, we would be looking into that, and we would report back to the SBC on the costs and possible funding sources for that. Right now, we are looking for a housing expert to be able to look at the OSSI funding in Alberta and the best way that it could serve the population.
Okay, so sorry, did you say that that's already in progress?
I am starting to look at that, yes.
Okay, thank you. Second question I had is until we adopted the CWSS strategy, we sort of had a model similar to this where we did split the different pots of money that we got up to different groups to oversee. And I thought the intent of CWSS was to bring them all into one funding stream so they could be better focused and targeted. Would this be taking a step backwards to go this route, or does this actually make sense? Have we discovered that we were wrong to sort of amalgamate, and now the thought process is, yep, the old way was working better?
Through the chair, there's many ways of looking at the funding models, and there's many different funding models out there. It's not saying that one is right or wrong, but what is the best for the community? And I don't believe we were talking about the full funding pot. We are looking at the OSSI funding, and that doesn't mean that they still wouldn't be at the table. So again, it's looking at the models of what is out there and what would work best for our community. And administration sees no harm in looking at that and confirming or looking at different models.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Final question, if I can, Mr. Chair. Councillor Schmidt-Rempel. So this is purely a referral motion to administration to come back with possible costs to this, so that we're not actually approving it today. We're just referring it for information gathering. I'm just unclear. If we don't know the cost of a third-party review, and I don't see the resolution up anymore, so I'm struggling to resolved. Okay, so it's different than what I expected. or thought I just heard from Mr. Fox. This is basically saying go and do it. But what I thought I heard is Mr. Fox say they'd have to do some exploration to find out how much is it going to cost and where it would be funded from. If someone can maybe help me with that.
Sure, through the chair, I think what I'm commenting on there is that if we have direction to go and do it, and we do not have the funds internally, that I would have to come back to the SBC and recommend where it would be funded from to have a consultant look at this.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll hop out of the queue for now, Mr. Chair.
Mayor Higgin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just the question to Mr. Fox, if I could, then with this resolution, the way that it sits going to council, this is, you're finding that this cost could be a part of the current budget and that there would not be additional funds required. And if it was the case, then you would come forward. Did I hear that correctly?
I would have to review this with finance and see what existing pots are in there, and if we did not have enough to support the consultant, then yes, I would have to come back to council to allocate some money towards this project, and that would be well before September 30th, because that is when we'd be looking at having the report back.
Thank you.
I was just going to ask the report back no later than September 30th, and that gives administration plenty of time for that.
I would have to see how many consultants are out there and what their workload is like, and if there was a different time, I would have to bring something back to the SBC to clarify the timelines.
And in terms of funding and that sort of thing, does this put a barrier on giving funding out with this resolution at all?
No, we would be looking at where it possibly could be funded, and then bringing that back to the SPC. Again, I don't know the exact amount. Some of the housing studies I have done in past have been from 30,000 to 100,000. So again, it depends on. This one's pretty specific. We are looking at OSSI funding, and that is pretty specific to Alberta. So we would be looking at that for a consultant that can look at that. So again, it's about finding the right person to look at Lethbridge and make comments and meet with our stakeholders. And if that's enough time, but on the costs, I'm not sure at this time for the costs.
Actually, if I could just a question to Ms. James, third party. Engage a third party. Your thoughts, just from your perspective, is this a good plan?
Yeah, we're happy to work with a third party for an independent decision on the best mechanism to deliver the programming in the city of Lethbridge. We'll even work with Mr. Fox and his team and help him find a consultant. And we work quite closely with Kathy Hopkins, the previous city manager. She helps us do our business planning and forecasting and that sort of thing every 5 years. And her daughter works with her, and she quite closely works with Calgary Housing Corporation. So we can look at some opportunities that might even be local to provide some third-party insight that already have the local Lethbridge context, and that also understand, as Councillor Carlson was saying, the old Shia way of doing things, for lack of a better term, where there was experts at the table. The committee, the CWSS committee, was actually a Shia committee, but it was experts at the table. So she would have all that institutional knowledge. So somebody like that might be an easier and a less costly way to deliver a service in a timely manner to council for review.
Councillor Carlson, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, Councillor Schmidt-Rempel, if you'd entertain a motion to postpone this resolution. I'd like to give our administrations just some time to come back with better answers. I would hate to give the direction to go and be and do and find out that it's at the top end of the quotes that Mr. Fox mentioned, rather than the bottom end. And so I'm wondering if we should maybe postpone this to our next meeting, or it could even come back as a directional resolution at council once we have better facts.
So look at bringing it back to, yeah, one of the other future SPCs or a council meeting, whichever is more timely.
Yeah, exactly. Like if it was in 3 weeks at council where we had the information, it could go directly to council, who has to make the decision regardless. Or B, it could come back to this committee with more of the information. I'd feel more comfortable knowing the dollar figure that we're looking at.
So specifically the research dollar figure on how much it would be to do the research on an assessment.
Agreed. Just and to know where that funding would come from.
Okay, so Mr. Fox, would you be able to work with Ms. James? You know, she has some local knowledge of local consultants. Thank you. Yeah, of local consultants, and I do like that idea of having somebody that has the institutional knowledge. Now, I can't speak for the rest of council, but I do think that's a good idea, and that could reduce some of the costs to that. Would that be able to be done by the next either SPC or one of the upcoming, sometime in the next 3 to 4 weeks?
We will try our best. I have no problem working with Lethbridge Housing on this. And also through the CWSS, we can involve them a little bit, try and come up with the costs and the time frame and when we could deliver a report back to council.
I was going to say, does that sound okay to you, Councillor Carlson, based on what you were asking?
Thank you. That it would give me more comfort to know what we're envisioning as costs and process, rather than just, I don't want to say a blank check, so to speak, but so yes.
Mayor Higgin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious to know on that question, though. I think understanding was if it's the budget and it fits within the budget that was previously allocated by council, as long as it's not more than. I'm just wondering what would, and again, I'm not one to vote in this committee, but just curiosity, if it was going to be above what is budgeted currently in a previous budget, that would come back. I don't know if it's important to have that back if it fits within budget. That's just a comment that I wanted to make.
So following up on that, Councillor Carlson, is there a way we can amend this motion to include that concern in here, so that maybe point 1 is for administration administration to evaluate the costs to engage a third party, and then incorporate what Mayor Higgin just said, and then if it is permitted under a current budget, or there is money in place to do it, to move ahead? Or to report back on what that cost is and then move ahead?
I guess I understand the thought process. I guess I come from a different tack, is that I would like to know what the costs are and what the budgeting source is, or the funding source is. Traditionally, when a budget is set, it's set for specific purposes, and if we say we'd like you to do this, that means something else has to fall away. So those are my only concerns. Is I'd like to know what the cost is and what the budget implication is if something else has to be put off, or if it can be accomplished without putting other things off, or if there's an extra ask. Those are just my questions, and perhaps I'm alone in concern about the budget.
No, and I understand where you're coming from on that. I'm just wondering if there is something we can do to amend this motion to include that on there, and then move this forward with that.
I'm not sure. I guess my strategy was to postpone for 4 weeks to our next meeting, but if there's other ways to accomplish it, I'd leave that up to the chair and maybe the clerk to decide, to come up with solutions.
Through the chair, I
Yes.
think a solution may be to pass the motion that is delivered up there, but say to report back as soon as possible to an SBC or council with the funding amount, scope of work, and costs and funding source, or something along the lines of that. And then that would be enable us to move to council for the resolution. But if we have the costs before council, we could include that on the report if we had it for that one, or at least the process and what the rough costs are.
That works for me. Councillor Carlson, does that work for you?
So I think so. So what we're saying is that in the 3 weeks, it'll take this to get to council, because it won't be on the agenda coming up. It'll be in 3 weeks from now, 2.5 weeks. We should have those costs and the funding source identified by then. Is that what we're saying? Very kind of similar to what we did with the veterans request.
Through the chair, yeah, that is the intent. And if we didn't have the process and the costs available for the council meeting, then we would bring it to the SPC or the next council meeting, whatever is timely.
Excellent. If somebody with a better mastery of words can figure out how to
I think
put
Mr.
that in.
Westerson is doing that right now. Quick, go now.
If I may, Mr. Chair,
Yes, sorry.
I think it's important to remember when we're looking at consultants and we're throwing out big numbers, that this is a 7 cities funded thing. So Lethbridge is one of the 7 cities. We do have data. This is not recreating a wheel. Medicine Hat has data of what they're doing, how they're delivering it. Calgary Homeless Foundation has data. Homeward Trust, like 7 cities. We're comparing Lethbridge. We're comparing results. We're comparing the outcome of pit counts to the 7 cities. So I think that I agree with Mike. It could be anywhere, but I think we really need to look at the fact that the data is there. It's readily available. It is online, and we're not asking for a big situation here.
Thanks for that. Do you need a minute? All right, we're going to take a quick 5-minute recess so we can get our wording right and get our ducks in some kind of a row. So we'll just be back in 5. Thanks. Okay, we are back. Thank you for your patience, everybody. We've edited or changed the resolution to read this, and I think Ms. Schmidt-Rempel, this is a friendly amendment. Be resolved that the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee refer this matter to administration to identify a cost, budget, scope, and timeline to engage a third party to 1, review the allocation of outreach and support service initiatives, OSSI funding, in Lethbridge and other Alberta municipalities, and 2, to identify a best-in-class model for the delivery of these funds in our community and report back to the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee no later than April the 27th, 2022. And Mr. Westerson, if you can explain the logic behind the timeline here.
Certainly. Internally, we have multiple deadlines to get things to different committees, to council. If we were to say come back in 2-3 weeks' time, following council's procedure bylaw, some agendas are published. Agendas are published 7 days in advance, so that we limit Mr. Fox or administration on returning within, already cut a week off their timeline. Second, bringing it back to committee, and if it's identified the budget exists internally, then the budget ask wouldn't then go to council. I believe that was spoken to earlier. And then committee would be posed with either the question to continue or direct administration to go forward with this, potentially at April 27th, if this is the direction of committee, or if the budget needs to be reallocated by council, it would go to a subsequent council meeting for budget adjustment and reallocation.
Okay, any other questions about this? No other questions? Sorry, no, okay. Jen? Sorry, Ms. Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much for this, and certainly I think that that the amendment is reasonable, and I appreciate Councillor Carlson and his questions. Councillor Carlson, I trust that this amendment meets your questions that you had, answers, and sort of comes up with what you were looking for too.
Thank you, Councillor. I appreciate this. It was what I was attempting to achieve with the postponement, but I think this makes much more sense, and it actually gives a referral to administration to come back with these costs and timeline, etc., so that we know what we're approving when we if we raise our hands for it. So thank you.
Okay. And thank you very much for that. I'm happy to compromise with you on this one. I have nothing else.
Okay, question's been called. All in favor? Good. Passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. James. All right, submission 6.1, explore the creation of a community care campus. I understand we have a couple of speakers that want to address this committee. Dennis Bremner. Step, if you can come forward. And just another little reminder, we have 5 minutes.
I'd like to address the covering letter. I'm not exactly a fan of the proposal that's behind it or whatever, but the covering letter specifically sort of bothers me here. If you look at page 3, it says the Social Services Integration Group had directed City Administration to investigate the feasibility of a community care campus in Lethbridge. My points are the following. Business cases were supposed to be done by CSD under the direction of SSIG as stated in page 3 of this covering letter. SSIG did not say to do one business case and that's all, which was the only thing the city produced. Page 2 of this covering letter says a community care campus would ensure accessible treatment options for those potentially unable to receive them in their own community. Lethbridge would be supporting the wider region and meet goals of health and well-being, and I'll address that at the end of this. Mr. Fox's department, and I call it Mr. Fox's department because I can't remember what the name of the department is, was in this covering letter states, it is acknowledged that the expanded provisions of social services, particularly within Lethbridge city limits, may cause concern among business communities within Lethbridge. And then finally, on January 20th, Mr. Fox's department then presented to you one promising model, which was the 19 acres downtown, as if a summary of all their work, which now appears to be just that, a summary of all their work. So because of the lack of studies other than the 19 acres, Mr. Fox's department also stating we will be servicing a wider region as indicated in the covering letter. The fact the city is only prepared to engage business as if the result was only to be the 19 acres, even though the location has not been picked yet. I would like to suggest the following. First, this committee directs Mr. Fox's department to change the name from Community Care Campus to Southern Alberta Rehab Facility so ratepayers get a clear picture of what the city intends to do the downtown based on the undefined wider region. Wider region can include up to Medicine Hat, in which case you have no idea how many people you're going to get in here under this particular plan. Second, I would suggest not to authorize the $100,000 expenditure because you will get back building designs that fit the 19-acre property unless that's what you want. And thirdly, you recommend more business cases be done by CSD in the spirit of the SSIG directive so a proper elimination process can be conducted. We seem to have the cart before the horse. I note that they indicate that the opportunity Lethbridge is going to identify properties suitable from this study. So what I would suggest is that you have Opportunity Lethbridge identify 19-acre properties elsewhere throughout all of Lethbridge property and have them do a business plan. Because I can't believe that the reason why we're considering the 19 acres, even though in fact it has not been picked yet, is because we have an old building that the Lethbridge owns right beside the train tracks. So obviously then, if it's not that old building, what keeps us going back to concerning that 19 acres and why was the reason that Mr. Fox's department only produced one business plan, and it happened to be the 19 acres. So I find that Opportunity Lethbridge, which I understand is part of Lethbridge Lands or something or other, can identify properties. So if they can identify properties after the fact, after we spend $100,000 to have people design buildings that they don't know how big or the number of people we're going to have contains, why can't we, before we spend $100,000, identify 19-acre packages, assuming 19 acres is more than enough, obviously it must be, and do plans and projections on them. So, as a result of the comment, wider regions, I had originally stated to you that I felt that within 5 years we would have 700 attics in Lethbridge downtown. As a result of wider regions, I'm going to up that number because Medicine Hat is listening, Tabor is listening. All these other places that have problems, you're setting yourself up for a Southern Alberta rehab facility. If you wish to keep wider regions in the descriptor, then you are setting yourself up, in which case a community care campus is for the community. It's not for everybody outside the community. So why would we be calling it a community care campus when we have negated that by saying wider regions? So let's call a spade so that people in this city can understand exactly what we are doing here. And I'm done. Any questions?
Why don't we get to our next speaker and then we can ask questions after, or does anybody have questions right now for Mr. Brenner? No, not at the moment, so we'll bring our next speaker is Alvin Mills.
Okay, everybody. I just want to apologize. I have some of my notes on my phone. I was having issues because my phone is, my kids call it my 1970s phone. So
You have a BlackBerry too?
Hello, everyone. My name is Alvin Mills. I have lived experience in drugs and alcohol. I am also a member of the SSIG committee. I am the founder of Gimmapipitsin Renewal and Healing Center. Gimmapipitsin is a Blackfoot word, very significant, kindness to others. It's got a lot of meanings, but caring for others. So I agree with item number 4 from the draft of suggested recommendations from the SSIG. Recommend that the City of Lethbridge continue advocating and working with the provincial and federal governments and the Blackfoot Confederacy to establish more recovery-based services outside of the City of Lethbridge. Example, Fresh Start Recovery Center, Therapeutic Treatment Center in Laverne, and Bringing Home the Spirit in Standoff. I've also, in dialogue with the Healing Lodge, the Kainai Transition Society. Those are some of the recovery places that anybody that's in recovery can, Laverne's gonna have, it's a $28 million facility and they're projecting 75 beds. These services could also assist in moving pressure from services and enforcement organizations within the urban boundary. As to community care campus, please consider item number 2 on page 2 of the consultant's report. Locate at or near the outskirts of the entire city for certain social services as rates of relapse, re-engagement in substance use is higher when people trying to get clean are surrounded by others that use substance, from page 3 of the consultant's report. Given the campus will serve large number of Indigenous peoples, the Indigenous community should have a direct voice on whether or not they believe a campus approach is the best interest of Indigenous people, from page 40 of the consultant's report. Yes, Indigenous engagement is necessary, but that engagement must be broadly addressed as there are many and various ideas and opinions within that community. As for the Renewal and Healing Center, that's my organization. We want to help bring our people home. I have a proposal that would have a recovery camp at the east end of the Blood Reserve, also Blackfoot traditional lands. Men and women at the camp will stay at 7-day intervals. One of the requirements will be 4 days clean. Also, the recovery facilities are starting to recognize methadone and Suboxone as tools of recovery. When we're struggling out there, when we wake up in the morning, the first thing that's on our mind is we're chasing that dragon. We're experiencing withdrawal. With methadone and Suboxone, if they're compatible with whoever's struggling, they control the cravings. Opiate is such a strong disease. It's like how you need water. It's like how you need food. And opiates is just, one day you can't just get up and quit. And relapse is part of that recovery process. So having a 7-day camp out there, it'll be for men, and then it'll be for the women. And it'll be drug-free out there, 10 minutes outside of town. There'll be no drug dealers. You'll be right within the land. And we're gonna have programs there. And we won't have to worry about zoning or any neighbors complaining. Maybe the coyotes might have something to say, but other than that, and I liked how the proposal went. I had great assistance from the City of Lethbridge, how we could do this to help our people through the Blackfoot lens. And with Lethbridge, supporting this. It was a great example of the city taking those steps of truth and reconciliation, where the city is supporting what I want to do to help the people that are struggling here in the city. I've struggled here in the city, and I'm in my 13th day of recovery. Most of my life I've lived here in the city, but I am from the Blood tribe. I get out, the first day I get out, they bring me on the bus. I get out from the Lethbridge jail. They bring me. Where do they drop me off? Right at the Alpha House. So on my own initiative, I've been in contact with Heidi Heavy Shields. She's the native liaison out in the Lethbridge jail there. Kaina Healing Lodge. So once the recovery camp, very interested in the recovery camp. Once the recovery camp is a go, and then I'm going to start doing, how do you call it, where they, information sessions on the recovery camp. Right away, if somebody gets released from jail there, as soon as they're getting off that van, trying to go into the house, the drug dealers are there. Do you want a point? When you come back up, we got a point for you if you want. But no, I'll intercept them, or we'll already make arrangements. Before they get off that bus, they'll want to go to the recovery camp. We'll grab them. We'll bring them to the recovery camp. There are far too many triggers and distractions in the city. So the outskirts of the city is when they can start that path of true healing. I like the comment, one that from the CEO from Lethbridge Housing. She mentioned trauma. Trauma, grief. Those are the two main things that keep us entrenched in the addictions. We numb our feelings. Until we can start addressing the trauma, the grief, and the suicide intervention, until we could start addressing those, then the true healing begins. In 2014, 2015, I used to work at Three Voices. I came with a contingent. We sought an audience with Stacy Bork. She had some of her staff there. Marty Thompson was there. And we brought up, Nathan Nordorf still has our proposal, Rachel Harder at that time. We brought up this, we need a facility to work on the trauma. And I've been bringing up programs after programs, trying to see if I could do something to help the people that struggle out there. And now, if this recovery camp can get going, and I do have relations with them, this will be a good way of transitioning them back to the homeland, to access the resources there. I do have a team of peer support workers. They've been through the fire. They've had that feeling of wanting, of trying to feel good, and then doing what they can to get money, to get the drugs. And now two of them are over 2 years clean. They've been through the fire. So once this recovery camp gets going, and then you'll start seeing my peer support. They're going to be all over the city. Again, I'm going to push for funding from my peer support mentorship funding. And these are the ones from here in Lethbridge. They lived that life. And like, I'll be 61 years old this summer. And I just wanted to add, especially for one of my peer support, the fatalities that are happening. They found one of them on the other side of Park Place Mall, another one by this park. So right now, what I'm seeing is the situation is going to get worse. And I just want to acknowledge the committee that was here for the support that you guys have shown for the recovery cap. We don't have no easy answers to this, but I think we have to start at some point. And I really thank you guys for giving me this opportunity just to see what I see and to help how I can to help with this issue of the addictions and that.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. I appreciate. Thank you very much for your very compassionate speaking to us today. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And if anyone feels like if they need to ask anything, they could.
Sure. Do we have any questions? Do we have any questions for either of our speakers here? We have nothing at this time. Thank you very much. Who is the person to talk to about the creation of the community care campus? Is it Mr. Fox, or who is?
Through the chair, I believe if any questions, Marty Thompson from Community Social Development is here to answer any questions, and he's also, I believe, Takara is here as well. Okay, Mr. Thompson, just quickly, if we can just sort of get to the point of where we are at right now at the creation of a community care campus. What do you see as coming up in the next little bit, and what are some of our challenges?
Thank you, members of council. So the community care campus concept has been bantered around for 20 years. Many different names, many different interpretations. It could be as simple as co-locating like services. It could be co-locating similar and non-similar services, active, wet use versus sober, many different concepts. So as you know, council directed us last year to start exploring that concept. At the same time, running parallel to that was the SIG committee, who in their work brought up the concept of co-locating like services. And that's where it kind of gave birth to that, the two names kind of came together. And so at the direction or the request of SIG, we did an initial exploration document, which you have a copy of. And as you can see, there's more questions than answers, and some good questions. And so what we're coming to council for today is saying this is a pretty deep and broad topic, lots of different opinions, and our job is to collect that information in the most independent, unbiased way possible, present it back to council with some options. To do that, it's going to require a study, which is going to require money. But it's really at the direction of council. If you want this thoroughly explored, we just need your direction.
And I think it's important to emphasize a site has in no way been chosen at this time. There's a lot of rumors and thoughts and speculation, but that is definitely not decided at this time.
You are absolutely correct. Again, this has been talked about for 20 years. And has the current location of the homeless shelter come up many times? Absolutely. That and the mall and different locations. So part of that study will be defining what does a community care campus model look like for Lethbridge? What's the right model? Okay, because the model in Grand Prairie that they're implementing is the model they've custom designed for their community. We need to look at the models, answer those questions, and then eventually have that, where could it be, right? And then the final stage would be then, if it's approved and the decisions are made, what's it going to cost? So this is not going to be easy work. It's going to require lots of engagement, lots of different opinions. And, within that diversity of opinions is good. It's important.
Thank you. Councilor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much. Mr. Thompson, I've got quite a few questions. I'm just going to start with the first one I have, and then I see there's others in the queue. Tell me what your engagement plan looks like. There are a lot of different groups you have to engage with, and that I know personally I would insist you engage with. What does your engagement plan look like at this point?
We don't have an engagement plan. We don't even have a scope of work yet. We ultimately, with that, if we are to proceed with this, we would do a scope of work, we would do an RFP, and within that document, we would spell out an in-depth engagement strategy.
I was hoping you'd have some plan in place, but
well,
thank you.
I can tell you it's going to be broad. It has to be. It has to involve service providers, the Indigenous community, different levels of government. Keep in mind, most of the services, well, virtually all of them, are not the mandate of the City of Lethbridge, right? It's the mandate of primarily the provincial government. So right off the bat, they have to be involved in this work because, for example, right now at the current homeless shelter, the OPS, the stabilization center, the homeless shelter are all the mandate of the provincial government. They're service providers. It's simply located in the City of Lethbridge in our building.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Thompson, for being here to answer some questions. And I really appreciate you starting with it. There are more questions than answers in the report because I had lots of questions, but I think you making that point summed it up for me that in order to answer some of the questions that were proposed by some of the correspondents we had in the speakers today, we'd need to move forward. Is that in response to some of the questions we had from the presenters prior? Is that what I'm hearing, that if we did proceed with what is being proposed, it would answer many of the questions that were asked by our previous presenters?
Yes, that would be the goal.
So thank you for that. Mr. Chair, through you to City Manager or Designate, I'm not sure if Mr. Brierley is there. Budget for this is up to 100,000 to get a consultant procure the report. What do we have left in council contingencies? That seems to sort of be the fallback position. I'm just wondering what's left in that budget.
Mr. Vanden Heuvel, are you ready to answer that question?
I am just clicking screens here. I've got a number there. I just want to make sure that I'm pulling it up correctly. Bear with me 1 second.
And Mr. Vanden Heuvel, if you need a second, I'll ask a further question of Mr. Thompson, if I may.
So, sure. If you want to do that first, go ahead.
If you've got the answer, that's great.
Okay, I've got the answer right now.
Thank you.
So right now, in council contingencies, it's showing a balance of 42,500, and it has 3 items earmarked in there, assuming that council uses council contingency for these. We saw the previous presentation from the Veterans Association, so there's 22,500 marked there for that. We have the Community Care Campus, which Marty is presenting currently through his submission, an earmark of 100,000 in there. And then there's another earmark for another request to come to council at a future time. So every year, there's about $120,000 that goes into the council contingency. So the 2022 allocation of 122,000 is still yet to be put in there. And the intent each year is to utilize the council contingency to its fullest. Otherwise, it returns back into the MRSR. So it's available during that term of council for the intentions of what council decides. So within the contingency, there is an earmark of $100,000 for the community care campus should it go forward.
Okay, thank you. So we do have funding available, is what I'm hearing.
Correct. That's exactly it.
Okay, thank you for that. My other question was, Mr. Thompson, timing for this. Council is just heading into budget and planning for 2023 to 2026. So I don't even remember. 26, I believe. 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, 2023, 2026. What is the timing that is expected on this? Is it something that could wait for council deliberations in the upcoming budget, or is it something that we've got some steam behind, we should move forward?
You know, again, this discussion has been ongoing for many, many years. If council wants to wait, you know, for some time to actually do this work, you know, there's nothing requiring us, or we are simply following up with a council directive to explore this. So can it wait? I'm going to defer that back to council or to the city manager for their direction.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Schmidt Rempel.
I guess a little bit to follow up on that question. Have we presented this to any of the other groups that we need to be working with? You indicated, you know, the other service providers, Alberta Health Services, certainly Indigenous partners. Do we have buy-in from other groups for a centrally located community care campus at this point? Or have we even initiated those discussions?
We've had not in-depth conversations. We have met with Alberta Health Services and the Ministry of Community and Social Services a number of times on this topic. And the reason those two ministries, because AHS, of course, runs the OPS, and the Ministry of Community and Social Services funds a lot of the other services. And so I'm going to defer that back to Mike, our director, Mike Fox, as he was involved in those meetings with Mr. Thomas Mountain and Sharon Blackwell on this very topic.
Through the chair, thanks, Marty, for that. Yes, the province is aware of the idea of a community care campus in Lethbridge. Currently, there would be no operating funding currently until we flush out what those ideas are. They would be interested in being part of the process as it unfolds. But again, we haven't got direction yet to do the full study, find out the location, find out which model we are going to follow. There are several models that have been used across Canada and the States, and we don't have that information yet. So it's very preliminary to say who will be engaged, who is at the table. But that would be part of, if we hired a consultant, they would be flushing that out. I'm sure there'd be many times that we would have to come back to the SPC as the consultant works through their work to make sure that we could make sure council is informed and making decisions along the way, making sure that no groups or stakeholders are left out. And I am considering that this would be a long project. It's not going to be done overnight. And because this Care Campus idea has been around for a long time, we could bring it to the budget deliberations in the fall when you're looking at all the initiatives that council is looking at. So there would be no problem in us waiting off that, as Mr. Thompson mentioned, that really we're trying to follow up on all of the direction from the previous council and make sure that this council is still on board and wants us to move forward with items, but they can wait till the budget time.
Thank you. But at this point, we haven't taken opportunity to engage with Indigenous communities to see if this is something that we have that buy-in on.
Through the chair, I believe this notion of a community care campus has been discussed with Indigenous parties, and the same thing comes as a lot of questions. And I believe it doesn't matter what population. When you are talking about a community care campus, there are a lot of different ideas. The idea of healing people and helping people out, everybody is on board with. It's how do we get to that reality.
Thank you.
Councilor Middleton Hope.
Thank you. I'm just trying to sort of sift through some of this, and I think one of the first things that I have a question of, and I guess it would be to Mr. Fox, is do we have capacity in your proposal here, in your report? You talk about three specifics. One is conducting the community engagement, conceptual designs, looking at a business case for a community care campus. Do we have the capacity to do that internally? Because there's no indication in here, Mike, that we're going to be looking for a consultant on this. So have we done the work? Do we have the resources? Do we have the capabilities to do this?
Through the chair, I don't believe we do have the resources or the expertise in looking at these items internally at this time. The business case part really will flush out what are the like services that will be together. And that is going to take some of the consultation of the community to decide on that. And then once you understand which services are going to be, it's about what is the size that is needed. And then once we know the size, then we'll know what size property or location that we're going to be looking for of property, and then it would go into the location. At least that's how, in my meek mind, that I'm sort of playing it out. There may be other things that I am missing, and I know Marty has been dealing with this a lot longer than I have in Lethbridge, but I believe, again, I don't believe that, I believe we would have to engage some external consultants for this.
Just a follow-up to that to Mr. Thompson. Marty, then do we have, obviously you've done a substantial amount of work on this, and I appreciate that. Do you have individuals or organizations that you would request participated in an RFP? This seems to be fairly specific work as opposed to designing a building or something of that nature. So are there groups out there that you're familiar with that could meet the expectations of an RFP on this?
You know, Councilor Middleton Hope, remember that this project was kind of running parallel with the SIG committee, and they asked the same questions when doing that initial document. And so I connected with, again, 7 cities, different people, connections, to find someone who, you know, was very learned in the area, objective, unbiased, and ultimately all roads pointed to the consultant that completed this initial document, Org Code Consulting out of Ontario. And because the cost to do that initial document was very minimal, I believe it was $8,000. It fell again. We followed procurement processes, but it was very inexpensive. Now, this individual has assured us that he can do it, because he has a deep vertical in that area. He has done this work throughout North America, or throughout the world. It would probably be cheaper and quicker to have him do it. But again, I think it's important that we would engage in an open, transparent procurement process to make sure we're getting the best consultant. It's objective, transparent. Would that person apply? I'm confident they would.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I see none in the queue. I do have a resolution that I'll pass on to Councillor Carlson, if I may. Mr. Carlson, be it resolved that the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee recommend that City Council approve a budget up to $100,000 with a recommended funding sourcing from council contingencies to procure a consultant to do the following. Number 1, conduct community engagement on the creation of a made for Lethbridge Community Care Campus. 2, create a conceptual design for a community care campus. And 3, develop a business case for a community care campus. Mr. Carlson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Entertain any questions at this time?
Councillor Schmidt-Rempel.
I'm wondering if it's not premature to be creating a conceptual design for a community care campus. Since we have note sites selected, we don't know what services or size of property we're going to be needing. I feel like it's a bit premature to have that included in this until we have those things established, and then look at what conceptual design would look like.
Thank you, Councillor Schmidt. Rempel, perhaps Mr. Thompson or Mr. Fox are better positioned to answer, but I was thinking that the conceptual design may help inform the business plan and the site selection. So I think they all, in my mind, they would all tie together, but perhaps I'll defer to people who probably are much smarter than I am.
Mr. Fox?
Through the chair, Councillor Carlson, you are correct. That was how administration was looking at that, is that once we figure out the types of services that could co-locate, then you would look at how it would look, and you would need that conceptual design to know the size to start looking at where they are. But we can break this apart and make sure that we return to council on the different steps. And if you wanted to amend the motion to make sure that we do that, we could come back to the SBC after every step to make sure that you're informed and you agree with the process as it unfolds.
Thank you for that, Mr. Fox. Any other questions?
I guess I would just follow up with that, in that I would be more comfortable with that step by step, just because we do have so many rumors out in the community as to where this is going to be located. I think this would help quash some of that.
I think I'm feeling we're doing an amendment here. Is that does that work for you, Mr. Carlson?
I didn't quite hear the amendment, but I'd rather have, I see it all sort of together rather than doing it piecemeal. I think you're better served to do it all at once, but that's just my personal feeling. So I'd like the committee to decide on that rather than just me.
Anyone, Councillor Palladino?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the concern is that when you create a conceptual drawing, people think it's a site plan, and when you do a site plan, you have a site in mind, and so that's what I think Councillor Schmidt Rempel's concern is. That I think if it's done block by block, you know, like a offices or something, 20,000 square feet, and then you did something else, as long as it wasn't a site plan. So I think the word conceptual might be confused with that.
So you're going with just step by step, sort of a design? Well, to me, I think what Mr. Fox is saying, let's get the conception out there, and nothing is permanent. Just get the conception, and then we can work to where the site is and everything else around it. I think I'm good with that. Is that fair, Mr. Fox?
Through the chair, we would intend to engage the SBC, so if it further adds comfort to the public and council, I have no problem with putting in another part on this resolution with regular updates to council as stages finish, and then we can work through that. And Councillor Palladino is correct that there are different types of conceptual drawings, and boxes are different than actual having siding colors and roofs and everything else. So there are different types of concepts. So again, as we work through that, we would do regular check-ins with council. And if you would like to amend the resolution to make sure that that is in there, administration has no issues at all with that.
I think I'm seeing a lot of yeses. Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
I'd appreciate that. In my mind, that was already implicit, but I think it's much better if we make it explicit, that there needs to be regular check-ins, not just so that the committee is comfortable and council is comfortable, but so the community is sort of engaged and kept informed. So I think that would be appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Fox, for bringing that up.
Good.
Another question I have, And sorry, Mr. Chair, I don't have the resolution up on my screen. Can I ask Mr. Western, can you show me again exactly what it says?
Well, I can read it. Why don't I read it to you?
Even better.
Yeah. Be it resolved that the Cultural and Social Policy Committee recommend that City Council approve a budget up to $100,000 with a recommended funding sourcing from council contingencies to procure a consultant to do the following: conduct community engagement on the creation of a MAID for Lethbridge Community Care Campus. Number 2, create a conceptual design for a community care campus. And number 3, develop a business case for a community care campus. And this has just been added, further be it resolved that administration provide regular updates to the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee at each step.
Thank you for that. It was in the second section. I think there was 4 bullets in there. The second one, and sorry, I don't have it in front of me, so I'm going
create a conceptual design for a community care campus.
I wonder if it would give some comfort to my colleagues around the table and the community if instead of a conceptual design, if we said conceptual designs, because there could be several iterations. There could be a vertical design, a horizontal design, a urban design, a rural design. So I'm wondering if that would give some comfort so that we're not actually saying this is the design or this, what we're saying, give us some ideas. And they are conceptual.
That's fine by me. Anyone else? Yeah, that's fine. Everybody seems to say yes. Mr. Fox, you're good with that? So we're going to call it conceptual, create conceptual designs. Sure. Yep.
Perfect.
When you're talking about, sorry, Councillor Carlson, when you're talking about multiple designs, does this impact funding?
It could. I'm hoping that it would be minimal. Is my hope, but it sort of does give the impression that we are open-minded on this. We're not saying
and apparently open-pursed.
Well, we're not increasing the budget, so hopefully whoever reads the RFP.
Mr. Fox, you wanted to add that?
I believe in the steps, it wouldn't add much budget to do if it was the box concept on showing some vertical and horizontal. I believe more of the cost in a preliminary design is when you get into actual what it looks like on site and the type of finishing and coming up with that type of finishings. But if we are doing the box sort of process, I don't believe it would add much cost to do multiple ideas depending on where it would be located.
Agreed. We've done it for the performing arts. When we did some work on that, we did some conceptual thoughts on that, and a lot of it was very vague, but it sort of just provides some very high level ideas of what it could look like. So agreed. It's not a detailed design.
I'm very comfortable with the fact you're going to come forward with as the steps continue. So we're well informed as to how things are going. Any other questions from for Mr. Anyone? For Mr. Anybody? Okay. I think we've got so we've just added the conceptual designs, I believe, in part 2. Otherwise, everything is the same as it was. Is that everyone to everyone's comfort? Mr. Carlson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel comfortable recommending this to council. It will be a council decision whether to proceed at this stage as the committee recommends, or to find some other options to proceed or not. But I feel comfortable recommending this to council.
Then I'm assuming the question has been called. All in favor? Okay, good. Moving forward. This is 6.2, Community Wellbeing and Safety Strategy Programming Contract Amendments. I believe we have a couple speakers, 2 speakers. Kim Lang. Oh, you're online. Oh, Kim Lang.
She actually sends regrets, but she's in Edmonton and she got called away.
Okay, so Connie, you're next. Connie Riddlehuber. Thank you, and thanks for your patience. It's been a slog. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your time today. My name is Connie Marie Riedlhuber, and I've been with the Keep in Touch Volunteer Lethbridge program since it began.
I've done over 150 intakes with seniors in our community, referred by our community referral partners, and I've heard their stories, concerns, and their identified needs. Our concerns relate to the lack of communication from the City of Lethbridge relating to the funding decisions, no communication on the expected transition to LSCO, nor the anticipated timelines. On February 23rd, our Executive Director received an email indicating the $50,000 in FCSS funding from the City and the $6,500 advertising funds would be moved to Lethbridge Senior Citizen Organization April 1st. There were some emails and conversations relating to the cost of operating the program, but no other conversations have occurred. The primary reason for the program is the beneficiaries who are at risk of further isolation and the loss of existing advocates that are supporting their needs and connections to the community. Volunteer Lethbridge is very willing to support the transition of the KIT program to the Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization, but we strongly suggest that there needs to be a comprehensive plan and process to accommodate this in order not to interrupt contact and support to the individuals receiving the service. Also, our database is a really significant factor that is now connected to your new CVMM system that the city supported. So we have to, anyone who's transferred or moved a software system knows that we're not sure it's possible and we're not sure how long that would take. To the best of our knowledge, there's never been a needs assessment evaluation if LSCO has the capacity to support the KIT program and the number of trained volunteers that will provide continued services. We believe that the best solution is co-funding the program to capitalize on VL's volunteer management and also enhance the program management and delivery of service for the program to go to LSCO. There are many aspects related to the transition of the KIT program that haven't been addressed that we just can't address in a couple weeks. We respectively request a 3-month transition period with adequate funding for Volunteer Lethbridge to work cooperatively with LSCO to ensure smooth and positive transition. In the documents that I provided, I actually, on page 11, which is the back page, there actually is a little bit of a program transition plan, just so you have a clear understanding of what would be involved. I wanted to talk just for a minute a little bit more about the Keep in Touch program. Keep in Touch started out as a basic caller program, you know, phone a friend. But we want you to know that things, especially due to COVID, have really changed. Ageism is actually currently one of the largest forms of discrimination in our country. And unfortunately, due to the online world that COVID has forced on seniors, it's escalated. Many seniors who have accessed the program are at high risk of isolation and they cannot access resources to advocate for themselves. They do not have the ability to navigate automated phone systems. It's interesting, the majority don't have cell phones, and 95% of our client base do not have computer competencies. They have a lack of family often living in our community as well that can advocate for them. The greatest risk now as we move, you know, Keep in Touch was a COVID response program, and if I speak to it, you know, I like the term COVID recovery. As we move into COVID recovery, the greatest risk to seniors is those due to their mental health and the length of time they've been in isolation, they're not going to be able to move beyond the isolation themselves, and that is significant based on the length of time they've been in lockdown. There are significant emotional and health risks that come along with aging that we know, loss of friends, life partners, and social connections for those living alone. But the pandemic has exacerbated those challenges, increased anxiety, and increased the strain on our healthcare system. What I'm noticing from a lot of our seniors now as well with the war upon us, a lot of them are European, the age of the seniors that we serve. A lot of them are European, and they're, as you can imagine, sitting in front of their televisions most of the day. And again, there's been a significant emotional health decline as a result of that. So the program did start as a pilot project to support mental health and wellness, but it's really become more a critical lifeline prevention and intervention program. And we have had a lot of participants that we have, our volunteers have supported them to death. We've had many in the program that whose life has ended while they were part of the program. The Keep in Touch program is different from the Navigator system in that it's volunteers offering a considerable amount of time building a relationship with the senior, talking, sharing stories and concerns. We have some of our participants now who have talking to the same person, the same volunteer, for over a year and a half. Of course, the tone of their life right now especially is loss, and they need positive influences. Since the program began, our volunteers have contributed 1,600 direct calls to seniors. They assist in shouldering the mental health and exhaustion and supporting and empowering them while scanning for their needs. So we often find critical needs that are not being met. And then, of course, we make referrals to the Navigator system. Most of our volunteers are really enjoying the experience, but I think one of the things that's occurred that we never imagined was the majority of our volunteers are retired, and many of them are health professionals, and so it's become a meaningful way for seniors to help seniors, and that we have those that are capable helping those that aren't as capable. And also for our younger volunteers, it gives them learning to gain valuable career experience. Right now, we know that government agencies and nonprofits that support seniors and related services are overwhelmed. The majority of referrals that we receive are from individuals that are supporting seniors within the community, and they need additional assistance. That also, we get a lot of referrals from physicians, and that also is because of the created hardship seniors have right now, who no longer have a continuum of care because of the physician shortage in our area. So the Keep in Touch program really has become an essential conduit between seniors and service providers, so we're filling a gap. We hope it's a movement that will reshape how we engage, how we connect, and how we keep in touch with seniors. So we are requesting a transition period with funding from April 1st to July 1st, 2022, and we will, of course, I've actually shared the program transition plan and information and everything with LSCO already. And then we hopefully are looking for a partnership. I think just in simple terms, Volunteer Lethbridge is the volunteer specialist, and with the CVM system, they also have created something now that is really significant as far as keeping the client in the volunteer database and then integrated. It's actually an integrated system. So Volunteer Lethbridge continues to be the volunteer experts to provide the volunteers, and LSCO would take on the coordination of the program. Volunteer Lethbridge would also continue to support the Keep in Touch rural expansion through the province. So even though that funding is not part of the City of Lethbridge funding, we currently have 8 other districts and communities in Alberta that have taken on the program the last year. So thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. Do I have any questions from our presenter here? I guess I'll have a question for Mr. Thompson, if I could. He's there? Yeah. Just in reference to, okay. Just in reference to the transition period, is there a compromise that could be done in this regard?
Yeah, so we've been in contact with Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization, and they have agreed that should this resolution be passed, to have the Keep in Touch funds be transitioned to LSCO, that they would subcontract Volunteer Lethbridge for that transition period to ensure that Volunteer Lethbridge is resourced for the transition.
Good. Councilor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess to our administration, where did the communication fall apart? It seems here from our presenter, there was no other conversation other than the communication relating to the costs getting moved, and that there was no further communication, no reasoning for the change, no data behind it. I guess I'd like to know where that all fell apart and what the rationale behind moving it was.
So in early 2022, in January, all service providers who are funded under the CWSS integrated funding model were engaged to provide any requested amendments to agreements. So at this time, Volunteer Lethbridge in 2021 had $50,000 annually to operate the Keep in Touch program. And when we engaged with them in early 2021, they requested an increase to $118,000 annually to operate the program. And so in communication with Volunteer Lethbridge, as well as the Seniors Partnership that operates with Volunteer Lethbridge, LSCO, Norbridge, CMHA, and Lethbridge Housing Authority, there was discussion around whether or not the Keep in Touch program should stay with Volunteer Lethbridge. And because of the substantial increase in ask for budget, we did connect with other senior partnership members to see if they would provide this service for the community, while continuing to work with Volunteer Lethbridge for that recruitment and screening portion with the volunteers, since that is the mandate of their organization. And so City of Lethbridge staff were engaged with Volunteer Lethbridge throughout January. We engaged with them on January 5th, January 20th, January 21st, January 26th, January 28th. And at that point, we were engaging with Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization as well, who agreed to operate the program for approximately $63,000 annually, as well as provide other coordination of services because this position would be a senior system navigator position to coordinate while still working closely with Volunteer Lethbridge for the volunteers that are making the connections to seniors.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? I see none. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentations. I'm going to give this resolution to Councilor Palladino. Be it resolved that the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee recommends City Council adopt the following recommendations of the Community Wellbeing and Safety Strategy Advisory Committee and funding leverage from the Family and Community Support Services, Outreach Support Services Initiative, and Reaching Home Funding Portfolio. Is there a long one? Number one, approve $11,203.56 to Family Ties to deliver the River House Permanent Supportive Housing Program. Number two, approve $126,921 to Streets Alive Mission to deliver the Repurpose Center and Trusteeship Service. Three, approve $391,012 to the Young Women's Christian Association of Lethbridge and District to deliver the Hestia and Women's Permanent Supportive Housing Program. Number four, approve $53,270.20 to the Canadian Mental Health Association to deliver the Outreach Mobile Team Program. Number five, approve $20,256.16 to Volunteer Lethbridge to provide volunteerism programming. Number six, approve $30,100 to the University of Lethbridge for the Building Brains program. Number seven, approve $117,720 to Lethbridge Senior Citizen Organization for the Senior Services programming. 8, approve $3,500 to be allocated to the Holy Spirit Roman Catholic Separate Regional Division. Number 4, for the Family First Facilitator Program. Number 9, approve $1,480 to be allocated to the Southern Alberta Self-Help Association for the Versa Permanent Supportive Housing Program. Number 10, approve $64,064 to be allocated to the Lethbridge and Region Community Housing Corporation for the Eviction Prevention Program. And further, that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to sign the appropriate annual fee for service funding agreements subject to annual review and renewal at the discretion of the City of Lethbridge pending available funding from the Government of Alberta and Government of Canada. Councillor Palladino. Mike. The question has been called. All in favor? Oh, sorry. Councillor Carlson. Councillor Carlson?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, talking away to just myself, apparently.
Yep.
We just had the presentation from the Keeping in Touch program at Volunteer Lethbridge, but there's nothing in this resolution about a transition. Is that, again, implicit, or does it need to be explicit?
Yes, go ahead, answer.
So the $64,064 allocated to, the $117,720 allocation to Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization includes the movement of the Keep in Touch program to LSCO. And again, we have spoken with LSCO and they have confirmed that they are willing to subcontract Volunteer Lethbridge for up to a 3-month period to transition this program to ensure that any resources spent through Volunteer Lethbridge are provided to the organization.
Okay, so that is confirmed will be happening. It doesn't need to be outlined in this resolution then. Thank you. Oh.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right, no further questions. The question has been called. All in favor? Passed. Thank you very much. We have 6.3. This is from Monica Lowen and Josh Martin, co-chairs, Social Services Integration, Social Service Integration Group update. You've seen the update in the package. Are there any questions? And I believe Ms. Lowen is online. If you have any questions. I see no questions. Therefore, I have a resolution from Councilor Schmidt-Rempel. Be it resolved that the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee received the Social Services Integration Group SSIG update as information. Councilor Schmidt-Rempel.
I trust everybody's had an opportunity to read this, so if there are no questions at all, I will call the question.
Question's been called. Favor? Done. Thank you very much, and that is adjournment. Thank you for all your time and all your patience.